Spade back here with you for High Noon Leatherworks for another leather adventure. And today we're going to continue the knife sheath for the handmade German knife. So come on in and let's get started. Alright, again, here's the handmade German hunting knife that this guy ordered a sheath for. And on the last video we cut out the front piece of leather, the back piece of leather, and a spacer. And in the last video I mentioned the spacers for two things. In my opinion, what I use them for is to strengthen that sheath up, and it also will keep the blade from cutting through your stitching. So today my next step is I need to bevel these edges on the front and the back. Then I need to groove, put my stitching groove in the front and the back. And I'm going to measure my stitching groove off of my spacer. So I want to go just in the center of my spacer. So that's the first thing I'm going to do, is loosen my grooving tool. Set it down on my spacer. Put the edge of my grooving tool against my spacer and take my little micro screwdriver, and I'm going to push in that grooving tool until it's sitting perfectly in the center of that spacer. And I'll show you a little close-up of that. I know it's hard to see there, and I'll snug it down while it's, as you can see, it just slipped on me, so I'll have to snug it down. With that tiny screwdriver while it's laying down on my spacer. Then I can pick it up and crank it down tighter. So you see the edge here of my tool and how I measured that to go right in the center of my spacer. That way, once I glue this on and I put my holes in it and everything for the stitching, then I know my stitching is going to go through the center of this spacer. So let me take my beveling tool, and I've got my piece of leather with my jeweler's rouge on it, and that's what keeps that polished and sharp. So I'll strop that, come back to my front piece and start beveling that. Now I'm not putting a lot of pressure on that. The key to me for good beveling is a sharp beveling tool. It's not how hard you press. You want to make nice smooth cuts, and it's kind of like if your tool's sharp enough, then you end up with one piece of leather off of your beveling. I don't know if you can see that edge now. But I'm debating, do I want to bevel the back also, or leave the back alone, and once I sew it together, that'll make a nice smooth transition, and I don't get like a rounded edge on the front and the back. And I've never done that before. I've always beveled the front and the back, but I think this time I'm going to leave that flat and I'm not going to bevel that, and I want to see what I end up with once I put these pieces together. I can always bevel it before I stitch it. So I'll strop my beveling tool again, make sure it's good and sharp. Turn my corner. And again, it makes all the difference in the world how sharp your tool is, but also the angle that you're actually beveling at. And then sometimes I round these ends. And I'll show you what I'm talking about here. Sometimes I round these ends here for the belt strap, and then sometimes I just leave them square. I think I'm going to leave this one square, and because I'm not concerned about this matching up with anything like I am here with the spacer, I'm going to go ahead and let me strap this again. I'm going to go ahead and bevel the back side of the belt loop, the strap, so that it's more finished. And then I can put a burnish on that, and that'll give it a more finished edge. So it's beveled on the finished side and the unfinished side. So now it's got more of a rounded edge instead of square like we left here. So those two pieces, front and back, have been beveled on the front except for the strap for the belt, and that's been beveled on front and back. Then the next thing I need to do, remember we set our groover on our spacer. So the next thing I need to do is groove my front and back piece. And I want to make sure I take my time, because these grooves need to be perfect so that they match both on the front and on the back. And when you get down to that radius, that's where it gets kind of tricky. So you have to go really slow and rotate that little by little so that you get a nice finished groove around the tip. So I'll continue to groove. Notice how slow and I end up with one piece of material taken out of the groove. And there you can see the groove all the way around. That's on the back. Then I'll take the front. I want to do the same, and I want to take my time just like I did on the back. Especially around that tip area. That's where it's very critical to keep it consistent. So you want to go nice and slow when you're rotating it. Notice I pick it up and slide it. I slide my other hand with it so that I don't move my grooving tool while I'm sliding my piece of leather. And again, I end up with one complete piece out of that groove. And hopefully, yeah, you can get a good look at it right there, the way the light's shining on it. So there's the grooving and the beveling on those two pieces. If I put my spacer in here, I'll probably go ahead and dye this before I glue my spacer on. That way I'm not missing any spots and I'm getting a good complete dye job on it. And when I glue this top on with my spacer in between the top and the back, I will, there's the three pieces sandwiched together, spacers in the middle. But when I glue those on there, I'll glue the spacer onto the back first, because that's two of the unfinished sides of the leather facing each other. So that'll make great contact. Once that dries, I'll take some sandpaper, just very gently go over this finished side of the leather just to rough it up a little bit, so that my contact cement on the back of the unfinished side of the front piece will make great contact with the spacer on the finished side of the leather. That way I'll get very good contact, and then when I put my front on top of my spacer with my contact cement, I'll get a good adhesion and I don't have to worry about it moving around. Thanks a lot for coming along for the next step of the knife sheath project. Come on back next week and we'll go ahead and move on forward with this, and we'll start applying some dye and glue, and we'll probably get into drilling some holes and getting ready for stitching. So please follow along with this project with me, and as I always say, please like, share, and subscribe, and I'll see you next time.